This video will show you how to configure a lightweight directory access protocol server, or LDAP server, in ServiceNow. Administrators integrate with an LDAP server to streamline user login to ServiceNow and automate administrative tasks such as creating users and assigning them to groups. Your LDAP server becomes the single source of record for user and group data, as well as the sole repository for user passwords and policies. Users access ServiceNow with the same credentials they use for other internal resources on your domain. The integration always uses a read-only connection that only queries for information and never updates the LDAP server. Options for secure LDAP integration include SSL or VPN, which are discussed in the ServiceNow Wiki. Although we will not demonstrate a secure connection here, we will point out configuration differences for SSL along the way, starting with this. For SSL, you must upload your certificate before starting the configuration. You'll find instructions in the wiki. I'm logged in as admin. You must have this role to configure an LDAP server. Start by navigating to System LDAP, Create New Server. The details you specify here in the ServiceNow LDAP server record must match the configuration on your LDAP server. To avoid typos that could cause problems, it's a good idea to display your LDAP server in a separate browser window if possible, so that you can copy information and paste it into the ServiceNow configuration form. Here, select the type of LDAP server. We'll select Other since ours is not Active Directory, but as we go through this demo, we'll point out differences that apply if you select Active Directory. Server name is the name of the LDAP server as it appears in lists and record details. You can use either a name or an IP address. We'll use a name that describes our LDAP usage. The server URL field value must follow the format shown here, where hostname can be either the LDAP server IP address or fully qualified domain name. For SSL, the hostname provided here must exactly match that on the certificate. We'll use the domain name. This value after the colon is the externally accessible communication port where the LDAP server listens. For secure connections, this would be your SSL or VPN port. Port 389 is the default port for connecting to LDAP in clear text, and 636 is the default for connecting via SSL. Since ours is not a secure connection, we'll leave 389 here. If your network has redundant LDAP servers, you can specify multiple servers here. See the wiki for details. The starting search directory is the directory where ServiceNow begins searching for users or groups. This limits visibility into the LDAP hierarchy to this point and below, so no data above this directory are available for import. The information entered here is a common source of problems if it doesn't exactly match the directory configuration on the LDAP server side, so make sure it's correct. We'll copy and paste it. Click Submit, and that completes our LDAP server configuration. But LDAP users cannot log into ServiceNow until we import their data from the LDAP server. To connect to the LDAP server, the Active checkbox must be selected. Active is the default setting for new servers. And here we must provide user credentials for an account with read access to the directory levels from which we want to import users or groups. Check the wiki for formats accepted in this Login Distinguished Name field. If your connection is via SSL with the default port of 636, SSL is automatically enabled without selecting this checkbox. But if your secure connection uses a different SSL port, follow the instructions in the wiki. And if you earlier specified your type of LDAP server as Active Directory, the Listener checkbox should be auto-selected. If we filled in these fields correctly when we click Test Connection, we should get a message that ServiceNow successfully connected to our LDAP server. If you get errors here, check the server URL and login credentials and make corrections. But we passed the connection test, so let's save the updates, and then browse to confirm that the appropriate LDAP directory structure is visible to ServiceNow. Yes, we're in the right place and can see 4 demo users listed here. If Browse does not display the correct folder hierarchy, make corrections in the Starting Search Directory field on the LDAP server form and try again. You can apply filters to list only one part of the directory tree, which is helpful, for example, if you need to bring in a certain group of users and give them a particular role in ServiceNow. Clicking a username displays the available attributes. Okay, we're all set, so let's go back to our LDAP server and import the users. The ServiceNow base system includes LDAP OU definitions for users and groups. The data import process is essentially the same for users and groups, except the user data goes to the sysuser table and group data goes to sysuser group table. So we'll just demonstrate with users. After importing users or groups, you can add roles to determine which parts of ServiceNow the users can see. The best practice is to add users to groups and then assign roles to groups. We'll use import sets to import the data. Here's how it works in this context. First, we'll import the user or group data from the LDAP server into a temporary staging table in ServiceNow. This table is already set up in the base system as LDAP import. Then we use a transform map to match fields from the original data source to corresponding fields in the ServiceNow user or group table. For this, we can either create our own transform map or use those provided by ServiceNow, LDAP user import and LDAP group import. But even if we use these, some customization will be necessary to map fields from our LDAP server to fields in the ServiceNow table. And finally, we run the transform, which brings the LDAP data into the correct fields on the ServiceNow user group table. ServiceNow recommends having only one active transform map for a set of source and target tables. If your business requires more than one, for example, to import from multiple sources, enable coalescence on a unique field to avoid duplicate entries. We'll explain this later. For this demo, users are identified as CN, or common name, in the user table. Incorrect values in the RDN, or filter fields, are common sources of errors, so make sure these match the configuration on your LDAP server. For guidance, read about OU definitions in the wiki, and test the connection to confirm. If you get an error message, make corrections before proceeding. Here's our data source and its import set table name. We'll open this data source and check the fields at the top. The first time you import data from your LDAP server, you will have to select or create a transform map. See the wiki for instructions on how to create one. We've already created a transform map for our LDAP data. Let's take a quick look at it. When setting up an LDAP transform map, the best practice is to define it so that only the required fields are imported. Here are the field maps, which define how our required fields from the temporary staging table will map to the target fields in the user table. The U prefix on these field names indicates that they are user-created fields. The coalesce field is used to prevent the import of duplicate records. When importing data, coalescing on a field or set of fields means the field will be used as a unique key. If a match is found using the coalesce field, the existing record will be updated with the information being imported. If a match is not found, a new record will be inserted into the database. For example, if we had 2 John Smiths in our organization, we would want to make sure one John Smith record didn't overwrite the other during data updates. So to prevent that, we would coalesce on a unique field to enable the system to recognize them as 2 discrete records. The name fields are not unique, but the email field is. Everyone in an organization has a unique email address, so that's why it was chosen as the coalesce field. Let's go back to our data source and click Load All Records, which brings the records into the temporary staging table. Now we're ready to run the transform. All transform maps that match the target table are listed here so that we can specify which one to use. If we were importing groups, our group map would appear here and we would select it. In this case, we want to use the Import LDAP Users sysuser map, which is already selected, so we'll just click Transform. And this shows that our transformation is completed successfully. Let's check the user table to see if our imported users are there. This list is sorted on the Created field, and here are the new users at the top. They will now be able to log into ServiceNow using their credentials from the LDAP server. If we want these users to have a particular role in ServiceNow, we must assign them to a group with an appropriate role. Also, now that the LDAP server is configured, when new users try to log in, ServiceNow automatically checks the LDAP server and imports their records if found. This whole process is transparent to the user who is logged in on the spot. In addition, background jobs run at regular intervals to synchronize ServiceNow data with LDAP server updates. To avoid synchronization problems, make sure you update the ServiceNow configuration anytime changes are made to the LDAP directory structure, connection information, or login credentials. So that's how you configure an LDAP server and import data. If you have additional questions, please visit our wiki or knowledge base or ask a question in our ServiceNow community.